Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, both on Capitol Hill today, briefing those senior members of Congress known as the Gang of Eight on the administration strategy when it comes to Venezuela. NewsNation's Joe Khalil tracking it all from the Hill joins us now. What are we learning? The briefing is wrapped up. What do we know?
Yeah, it was about an hour, Connell, and this is the highest level meeting that we've had here on Capitol Hill when you've got the Secretary of War, Secretary of State, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, CIA Director answering questions of the Gang of Eight, that very exclusive group here in Congress of leaders on both sides of the aisle in the House and Senate, and the intelligence leaders in the House and Senate as well. The first reaction we heard from that meeting came from Senator Chuck Schumer, who came out and told the cameras that in his view it was unsatisfactory, and this is what he said next.
I asked Secretary Hegseth, Secretary of Defense Hegseth, would he let every member of Congress see the unedited videos of the September 2nd strike? His answer, we have to study it. Well, in my view, they've studied it long enough.
There is a bipartisan push to release the video or make it public, Connell. There's still disagreement, though, about the legality of these strikes and disagreement among those who have already seen that video, which is only a handful of members. Senator Mark Warner came out, gave us a little bit more nuance, not a lot of detail, but effectively said he still thinks it's problematic that the military is treating people who are running drugs the same way that they would treat terrorists with bombs or guns. Those were the words that he used there. On the Republican side, as we mentioned, they have a different perspective on whether or not this is appropriate or the right thing to do. Take a listen here, Senator John Cornyn from Texas.
I think it would eliminate a lot of the mystery and a lot of people's imaginations about what's going on. I don't think it should be controversial. I mean, we've seen plenty of video already. It's not pretty, but it never is. When you're using deadly force against somebody who wants to kill your children and grandchildren.
So what he's talking about there is releasing the video, saying that it would sort of end the mystery, and he thinks it's appropriate to do that. Again, he clearly supports the strikes, as do the vast majority of Republicans. There are some, however, that have raised concerns. And you mentioned, both in a bipartisan way, there is a provision put into the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Bill, that basically requires Secretary Hegseth to make this video public in an unedited version of it. Otherwise, he's going to lose 25% of the Pentagon's traveling budget. So that is a pretty strong statement, because it's not just words, it's not just rhetoric. That is actual text of what could be law that they're trying to use as leverage to get the secretary to release the full video of that September 2nd strike that has obviously become very controversial, Connell.
All right, Joe Khalil live on the Hill for us. To the region in question now, the Caribbean, and foreign correspondent Robert Sherman continuing his reporting from Puerto Rico today. U.S. military has a big presence there. What's the latest coming out of the region, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, as Joe attested to, this is obviously center focus in Washington, D.C., and there's reason for that because there's a lot of activity that's been taking place here in the Caribbean. I mean, just the movement of whether that's C-17s that we've seen today, Ospreys, F-35s, it is a constant flow in and out of major military firepower. And just to the south of us on the other side of the island, well, that's where you see U.S. destroyers that are tied up nearby in the ports. You see land vehicles, armored vehicles that are being loaded up into transports. All of this out in the open. And there's certainly reasoning for all of that, Connell, as the president has made clear that he wants to send a message here to Nicolas Maduro. In terms of the response that we've heard from the Venezuelan side to all of this, they want their response to be one of strength. They've been preparing, they've been drilling, and they said that they're ready to defend their country if that's what it comes down to. Believing that a position of strength is their best path forward here. But there's also widespread recognition from all parties here that there is certainly a tense environment right now in the Caribbean. People are waiting to see what the next move is made.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.